Okay, continuation of the first part. So we are in the second part now of the elbow complex. So now you understood how the presence of or the orientation of coronal fossa, and then just above the capitulum, that is just above the lateral epicondyle, you have the radial fossa where the radial the radius has to largest tuberosity. Okay, now uh, the trochlea, which forms part of the humero-ulnar articulation, is set at an angle on the medial aspect of the distal humerus and lies slightly anterior to the humeral shaft. So if you can see here if you can see the what you call as the humero-ulnar articulation, you can see the trochlea, because here the ulna is articulating with the trochlea on the anterior aspect, and during flexion the coronal fossa will come and lodge on the coronal. So here if you can see, if you draw a straight line, you can see that the medial part of the trochlea is comparatively larger and a bit downward, projecting downward, and this is actually the size of the hourglass shaped, the middle sided hourglass shaped sphere is larger than the lateral sphere of the trochlea. That's why what will happen is, you can see visibly, it is understandable here that the larger trochlea in the, it's a three-dimensional size is more in the three dimension. So anteriorly as well as downward, that is inferiorly, the trochlea is larger in size. So what will happen? So that means that the ulna, whenever it is lodging or it is articulating, it will be deviating towards this side. So if you articulate the ulna, naturally when the ulna comes into total extension, that means it is totally inarticulated, incongruent with the trochlea, both the medial and lateral. Naturally, to get more surface contact, this has to move like this. The ulna has to be positioned in this direction. So that shift we are talking about. A groove called the trochlear groove spirals obliquely around the trochlea and divides it into medial and lateral portions. So medial, and we are talking, we already told you that if you just divide the trochlea into two spheres, we have a medial and lateral. The medial trochlea, middle part of the trochlea is larger. The medial portion of the trochlea projects distally more than the lateral portion and results in what we call as this twist of the ulna towards outward is called as valgus angulation of the forearm. This is another picture to familiarize you with the, whenever we are drawing we will get such so this is the medial part, and now again you can see the middle part of the trochlea, this portion of the trochlea is comparatively larger. So what will happen is, it will position the this is the middle part, you can see the head of the humerus. So the ulna will be in a valgus position, that is out away from the midline. In the distal, proximal to the distal, it will be moving away from the midline. Here this is a posterior view. I just wanted to tell you that. So you can see the, in the posterior view you can see the olecranon fossa also. Now just going through the elbow joint, the elbow joint, humero-ulnar, the humero-ulnar and the humero-radial joint. This is the anterior view. Now in this anterior view you can clearly see that, even though if you draw a line like this, straight line through the humerus, see the shaft, and then see the position of the ulna. This is what we are talking about, is the valgus. If you draw a straight line, the line will come like this. But what is happening, you can see, is the ulna is not in the straight same line as the. That's why you see this position of the elbow in an anteriorly anatomical position. Anyone outstretches his hand or her hand, the females will have a larger valgus deviation than the males. You can see this. This is the valgus position. Posterior position also you can see that, and here the posterior, you can understand that this is posterior because you can see the olecranon process projecting. The ulna is comparatively longer here in the posterior. Here you can see both are in the same line. Here is the, you can differentiate with the head of the radius, which is a position here, and it is this thing articulating with what, to the capitulum. And here it is a H-shaped or the hourglass shaped trochlea which is present. The indentation in the humerus located just above the trochlea is called the coronoid fossa. I have already told you that, and is designed to receive the coronoid process of the ulna at the end of the elbow range flexion range of motion. The capitulum, which is part of the humeroradial articulation, is located on the anterior lateral surface of the distal humerus. The capitulum, like the trochlea, lies anterior to the shaft of the humerus, and a groove called a capitulotrochlear groove separates the capitulum from the trochlea, which we have already discussed. The indentation located on the humerus just above the capitulum is called the radial fossa and is designed to receive the head of the radius in elbow flexion. Radial fossa will receive radius, head of the radius in the elbow flexion. The coronoid fossa will receive the coronoid process of the ulna at the end of the elbow flexion range of motion. Posteriorly, the distal humerus, in the posterior aspect, the distal humerus is intended by a deep fossa called the olecranon fossa, which is designed to receive the olecranon process of the ulna at the end of the elbow extension range of motion. Now, just we'll it's an enlarged view of the articulating surfaces on the radius and ulna. You can see here the anterior and lateral view of the ulna. You are seeing the ulna. Now we can see, because the olecranon process is evident. So in the anterior view of the ulna, that is the proximal end of the anterior view of the ulna, you can see the what you can see is the olecranon process, and then you can see the ridge, which is called as the trochlear ridge, which is the ridge which will go into the trochlear groove. There is a groove between the two portions of the trochlea, and the ridge which is present in the ulna, which should go inside the trochlear groove, is called as the trochlear ridge. And then you have the inferior to that, you have in the anterior surface you have the coronoid process, which is also a ridge. This is the ridge which is present, and the trochlear presence of the trochlear ridge divides this into two concave surfaces just below the anterior surface, and this is called as the trochlear notch. The notch or the cavity is called as the trochlear notch. Why? Because the trochlea has to be lodged into this. And you can see in the lateral view, you can see the exact shape. The coronoid process is projecting like this, and the olecranon process also projecting. This gives a huge cavity. This increases the surface area. So this is very essential for this step. That's why it is very stable hinge joint, the humeral joint, and this is called, this area is, this particular surface is the trochlear ridge, and the whole thing is called as the trochlear notch. On this way or either in this way, this is the trochlear notch, this is the trochlear ridge. In the sagittal view, we can see the trochlear. This is in the anterior posterior view, we can see the trochlear ridge which has to lodge into the trochlear groove. The articulating surfaces of the ulna and the radius correspond to the humeral articulating surfaces. So that is the essential biomechanical aspect you have to remember here. It is a congruent joint because both surfaces are complementing each other. The articulating surface of the ulna and radius exactly corresponds to the humeral articulating surfaces. The ulnar articulating surface of the humero-ulnar joint is a deep semicircular concave surface called the trochlear notch. The proximal portion of the notch is divided into two unequal parts by a trochlear ridge, which corresponds to the trochlear groove of the trochlea on the humerus. The ulnar coronoid process forms the distal end of notch, whereas the olecranon process projects over the proximal end. The radial articulating surface of the humeroradial joint is composed of proximal end of radius known as the head of the radius. The radial head has a slightly cup-shaped concave surface called the fovea that is surrounded by a rim. The radial head's convex rim fits into capitulotrochlear groove. We can see that in the figure which is coming next. Here you can see we have already discussed the head of the ulna. Here I am talking about the radius at the head of the radius you can see, and this if you see in the vertical view, this is the view. It's like just like a coin with a indentation, and that's why we call it as a rim. The fovea has a rim. This is actually the head. This is the rim of the fovea head, and this is you see the surface which is fovea, the rim in the superior aspect, and the indentation of fovea. So here you can see the radial or what you call the radial or bicipital tuberosity here, and here this radial you can see that how it is positioned here, and this we call as the radial neck and radial head and radial tuberosity. Articulating surfaces on the radius, bones taking part, proximal end of radius known as the head of radius. The radial head has a slightly cup-shaped concave surface called as the fovea that is surrounded by a rim. The radial head's convex rim fits into the capitulotrochlear groove. The humero-ulnar articulation. The articulation between the ulna and the humerus at the humero-ulnar joint occurs primarily as a sliding motion of the ulnar trochlear ridge on the humeral trochlear groove. In extension, sliding continues until the olecranon process enters the olecranon process. So it's kind of a sliding which continues until the olecranon process enters the olecranon fossa. In flexion, the trochlear ridge of the ulna slides along the trochlear groove until the coronoid process reaches the floor of the coronoid fossa in full flexion. Although the opposing articulating surfaces of the trochlear groove and trochlear notch appears to be completely congruent, experiments with cadaveric specimens have shown that the articulating surface of the trochlea does not contact the articulating surface at the bottom center of the notch unless the joint is heavily loaded. You can I will show you, we have a figure later on which is we can yeah, here. So we are talking about the articulating surface, and it is here to clearly show that when the person is here you can see if this is a wall and the person is not contacted, the wall means that it is the hand is free without any resistance. Here there is no articulating surface area is comparatively less, and when the person loads you can see that here it is only this white, you can see where it is articulating, and here when the person is loading, the articulating area of surface or the contact increases throughout the joint. So this is in a way to free the joint is free from friction or loading whenever there is no load on the elbow joint in such a loading position, but only that happens and the surface area contact increases so that pressure decreases during the loading happens. So again I am repeating, although the opposing articulating surfaces of the trochlear groove and the trochlear notch appear to be completely congruent, experiments with cadaveric specimens show that it only articulates